Last year there was a 100% increase of referrals to England's only gender identity clinic for under 18s. Of the 14,000 referrals, 65% came from biological females. So I'm just going to address some of the propaganda coming out of America with regard to prepubescent female children who are gender non-conforming, and look at what some of their cheesy news items are saying.
We've seen adults share their stories on television shows and in magazines, but rarely do we hear from the youngest members of the transgender community.
Can you imagine if they referred to the gay and lesbian community in this way? People would go apeshit.
Increasingly, families are going public with what it means to be a transgender kid.
Question: how do families know what it means to be a transgender kid?
I hoped it was a phase.
Well, that's not such a positive start then.
Even something as simple as a haircut wasn't.
Apparently this female child wanting a haircut like a boy makes going to the hairdressers a minefield.
Poking at himself, saying things like, why did God make me this way? Why did God make me wrong?
You kind of have to wonder why they weren't able to just tell this little kid who's 4 or 5 years old she's just a tomboy and there's nothing wrong with her.
Confused and concerned, and I hoped that this obsession with being a boy would go away.
It's confusing when you like doing stuff normally associated with boys and everybody say, well, you can't do that because you're a girl. Of course you're going to start to think there's something wrong with you. You're only 4 or 5.
Those are the hallmarks of a possibly transgender child: consistence, persistence, and insistence. And she was meeting all those markers.
This is actually the advice that they're giving to parents who are concerned that their child is gender non-conforming. I've got a link in the description.
Pediatrician Dr. Michelle Forcier says gender identity is formed very early.
People used to ask me, are you a boy or a girl all the time?
It's not a fad or a phase. And I tell parents that even though they may feel or want to believe that.
So I went and had a little look to see what I could find about this Dr. Michelle Forcier, and it turns out only last year she said something very different to what she's just said there.
Gender nonconforming pre-pubertal children, and parents come in and say, what do I do? I say, love your kid. I said, we don't know where your kid's going to end up. I tell parents, your kid may be transgender. Your kid may be gay. And your kid may be cisgender heterosexual. I don't know. And if I could predict with my magic ball, I would for you, but we can't. And what we know is this is what you need to do now, is let your kid be loved and accepted for who they are and how they are.
Last spring, the LeMays went to Disney World and let their 4-year-old dress as Prince Charming.
He was really happy in that moment. He was being perceived as he wanted to.
What I'm seeing here right now is a female kid that likes to play boy games and boy roles, wants to be in a Prince Charming uniform at this Disney World event. To achieve that goal, their parents seem to need to tell not just the kid but the world that the kid is a boy.
After agonizing for years, Mimi and Joe say they knew it was time to listen to their son.
They can't have been agonizing for years over this because the kid's only about 4 or 5.
I explained to him that we can bring you to a new school and everyone will know you as a boy from the beginning.
Who's really being made comfortable here? Is it them that's really uncomfortable with the idea their daughter would present as a tomboy? The kid doesn't understand.
Right then he said, that's what I want.
He said, I want to be a boy always.
They introduce her as him and call him Jacob. Easy for them to deal with the fact that this is a gender non-conforming kid.
Last June, they cut his hair short, asked family and friends to call him Jacob, and let him live publicly as a boy.
You don't need to tell a child that they're in the wrong body.
People are going to hear your story and think 4 is really young.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a boy. The idea that I could have been groomed in this way for puberty blockers.
Children who have been shut down and told, no, you can't be a boy, or no, you're not a girl. We know those kids suffer, and there's a host of bad health outcomes and psychiatric outcomes.
I just do not like the cut of this woman.
Would you tell parents that in some ways it's riskier to wait?
Absolutely. In fact, what I say, the biggest harm is to do nothing.
Completely backtracked what she said last year, advocating lying to children about their sex body in order that they may fit in.
Ultimately, Jacob has made that choice.
As vacuous as these parents are, and as hard as it is not to judge them, they are probably doing this because they genuinely believe that this is the best thing for their child, not to be singled out as different.
It's whether or not we accept it or not.
Accept it, that's right.
It's really hard not to judge them, but people here to actually scrutinise are the medical profession, who are really misleading these parents, encouraging this, and the media, of course, who are selling the idea that it's acceptable to trans kids as young as 4 years old.
This really has been a journey for Jacob and his family. They have a long time before they even need to consider whether he wants medical intervention. Tomorrow we'll bring you the story of another transgender child who's a few years older.
I don't understand how anybody could just shrug this off. They are doing this to children. Subscribe, share about. Patreon allows you to contribute a monthly sum.